Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for our LeanScaper live Q&A with Mark Bradley. Mark is joining us remote today, so I'm going to pass the microphone to him and let him tell you where he is.
Well, just fresh off the road and barely got my computer set up, but yeah, just down in Columbus, Ohio at Hidden Creek, down for a little visit for a few days.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mark. We appreciate your dedication to the live Q&A. We are going to go ahead and get started. We do have our first question here. So the question is, I've had terrible luck with bookkeepers over the past few years. They are flaky and unreliable a lot of the time. What do you look for in bookkeepers and other professional service providers? And can you call out any red flags?
That's a really good question. I think quite often when you start scaling the business and you go to hire somebody to help out with the office management, oftentimes you hire somebody that might have more of a general business diploma of some sort. And so you don't end up with necessarily the absolute best accounting skills. And I think it's really important that prior to hiring somebody to do accounting, that you really look closely at how much accounting experience they have as opposed to administrative or office management experience. One common thing or mistake that I see a lot of people make is they hire friends and family to facilitate really complex skilled positions, kind of like hiring who you know instead of actually using a hiring process to find the right person for the job. I think this is a really common issue. I think it kind of happens naturally because we grow apprentices into highly skilled leaders quite often in our businesses. So we kind of almost approach hiring these administrative areas of expertise the same way, thinking we're going to grow somebody into that role or that they'll evolve on their own. But the truth is, without a functional leader who really is an expert in bookkeeping or accounting, we're really unlikely to ever evolve somebody. So I think it's better to start with someone that has the skills and experience from day one, which is usually a little bit more expensive than a lot of people want to pay when they're just getting going and scaling, getting to their first million. I would highly recommend using a fractional CFO service as a intermediate step, whereby you've got a true expert helping oversee the accounting, and then they could direct a less skilled bookkeeper. So I guess my main advice is you might continue to find the same problem unless you're going to really spend more money. And so what you may consider is a combination where you outsource a fractional CFO to give you a lot better insight and then use your local bookkeeper, or potentially even just outsource both the fractional CFO and the bookkeeping service. There's a few great companies in the industry doing that. You could work with Cycle CPA or McFarland Stanford. Both have excellent services that provide either full service turnkey accounting and fractional CFO, or standalone services as fractional CFO or just bookkeeping. But if you are hiring, definitely starting with the right job description and a more robust interview process is definitely a great place to start.
Thank you so much for that. We did have another question, which kind of aligns with this. It says, I'm interested in hearing what Mark would suggest an office staff or admin role would look like within an organization for a $5.5 million company.
Yeah, 5.5 that's a tough spot for sure. I think what I've always noticed, and I talk about the ones and the threes a lot, there's a big struggle often to get to your first three, which is 300,000, and then another struggle to get to $1 million, more struggle to get to 3, and then usually going from 3 to 10 million is a big hard climb. 5.5 is kind of right in the middle there. And so what tends to happen is getting to $1 million, the owner operator is usually doing everything. And then getting from 1 to 3 million, the owner operator tends to start creating much more specific management roles. An office manager is usually first, getting to $1 million. But then going from 1 to 3, it's usually somebody managing sales, somebody managing accounts, somebody managing the field operations. Somebody's usually managing estimating and sometimes even managing the fleet in there. It just kind of starts to morph a little bit. And there's a right and wrong in every business, but generally speaking, I think an office manager that can lead finance is a good, strong first hire, then operations manager, then sales manager. At 5.5 million, I think if there's realistically an owner that is really hyper focused on growing relationships, growing revenue, and growing people, I think that's a strong area of focus. And then I think having a good manager level person running finance, running ops, running sales. And then if you're doing a lot of recurring maintenance, having somebody overseeing customer service or account management. But at 5.5 million, having any more than really having like 4 functional managers would be probably proved to be pretty cost prohibitive on the overhead budget. I generally recommend about 10% of revenue be allocated for overhead salaries, and no more than 15%. And what tends to happen in around that $5 to $7 million range, I often see it kind of creep up to more like 15% of sales. And then as the business starts to crest 10 million, it kind of comes back down. And then if you're going to continue to try to push for 20 or 30 million, often it does start to creep back up as you layer in more overhead. But at 5.5, I would try to keep it in the range of 4 managers plus the owner.
We have a question from someone who attended last week's virtual intensives. It says, last week's session really opened my eyes to how much chaos happens before the work even starts. If a company wants to start implementing LeanScaper operating systems and job flow right away, what's the best next step to actually put this into practice with their team?
The easiest way to get started is just to get started. If you join the LeanScaper Accelerator program, we meet every week on Wednesdays. We call those sprint calls. We spend 60 minutes total, generally about 45 minutes. I personally deliver a sprint, which is a continuous improvement session. Every 4 weeks, there's a new block, and we kind of rotate through 4 main areas. So one is financial, one is efficiency, one's people, and one is customer. And really what we're doing is deploying improvements 1 week at a time, so that over the course of 50 weeks, when you look back, you've basically deployed 50 systems that will change your business. And we do that again on a weekly basis, but we also support that with a monthly 3-hour intensive to set the theme for the month. And then we have quarterly in-person or virtual streamed intensive events that are 2.5 days. And again, one of those is focused on financial and strategy. One is focused on people, one's focused on efficiency, and one is focused on customer experience and revenue growth, sales. And so really what we do is we just methodically and continuously embed improvements in the business by taking the time each week to actually meet. And with LeanScaper, we try to save you a lot of the legwork by creating templates and frameworks that you can update and deploy the systems a little faster in the company. And the way that we like to work is having you bring more people to the meetings. We don't want it to just be the owner. We really want it to be the leadership team in the company attending the meetings together, learning together, and then deploying these changes together. We know that works much better than an owner operator attending on their own and getting overwhelmed and not having other people to help. deploy the changes.
And we have a question here from Sam. Sam says, we are working on implementing many practices from the LeanScaper program. We've written a handful of SOPs, but are having a hard time deploying them. Do you have any suggestions on how to do that?
So the key with SOPs is the way they're deployed. And so oftentimes teams spend an enormous amount of time creating SOPs only to put them in a binder and stick them on the shelf. And that's really not the purpose of SOPs. An SOP is a standard operating procedure. And what we're doing when we write them, and thankfully nowadays with ChatGPT, it's a lot less work than it was just a few short years ago. Writing these all out manually and editing and copywriting and getting the language right. It's very easy nowadays to create SOPs with ChatGPT if you've got the domain expertise to know what to ask ChatGPT to do. So creating them is the easy part. Deploying them is only ever going to be functional if you have recurring meetings. Now, with LeanScaper, we call that the core 4 meeting structure, which is basically meetings at every level of the company, at the crew level, at the department head level, and at the leadership team level. And really, those core 4 meetings are made up of daily huddles, weekly check-ins, monthly updates or strategy meetings to update strategy, and then quarterly resetting SMART goals and having a deeper dive on strategy. So when you've got recurring meetings happening on every crew, in every department, and at the leadership level, what happens is as you create a standard operating procedure, you deploy it in those meetings. So daily crew meetings are typically where SOPs really get delivered. And if every morning your crews meet for 15 minutes before the work starts to talk about the day's goals, their needs for labor, material, equipment, and subcontractors, or any information that they might need to proceed. At that meeting, it's a great opportunity to release new SOPs. Another opportunity, if it's a bigger, more extensive SOP, you might want to do that at a monthly meeting. Or again, at the quarterly strategy reset meetings, if you've got some major changes, you could always spend a little bit more time there. But generally, I think, 5 to 10 minute overview of an SOP on a morning huddle is a great way to launch them. And then anytime you're having recurring problems, because sometimes we create systems and then the problem's back a few months later, this is totally normal, happens in every company, then we just go through that SOP again in the morning meetings and use them as refreshers. So we actually come back to them as almost like toolbox talks, ideally. Now, the best way to deploy SOPs at scale is actually to use Greenius. Greenius can be used in many different ways, and one of the best ways is definitely to take all of your SOPs, take the document, you can plug it into a product called Synthesia, which creates an AI video using your voice and an avatar just off of the script, which is nothing more than the SOP. And it'll actually build a course in a matter of a few minutes that you can then upload into Greenius. And so we're seeing a lot of companies starting to fully deploy all of their SOPs using Greenius. And this way, when you do hire people on, they get assigned the SOP training in the order that they need it and for the role that they're fulfilling as part of their career pathway or apprenticeship in Greenius. So that would definitely be my biggest recommendation as far as deployment. But Core 4 meetings are gold. You use them for everything, and that is really where SOPs turn into culture. So if you're not using recurring meetings at set times, daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly, I would always start there. And you can download the LeanScaper framework for the Core 4 meetings with all of the supporting agendas from the Community Resource Center.
You kind of answered the next question there, just talking through the Core 4 meetings, but we did have somebody ask how many meetings per week is considered unproductive. Did you want to dig a little bit deeper into the Core 4?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the crew level, my recommendation, what I've found to work really well is a daily huddle for, first off, when the crew foreman or crew leaders come in the morning, they should come in 15 minutes before the crews and do their huddle with their manager. Maybe it's a production manager, an ops manager, or maybe it's you, the owner. So 15 minutes with the crew foreman, crew leaders, whatever the title is in your company. Then the idea is get them out of the yard as fast as possible. So they get in their trucks and leave ideally within 15 minutes. And then when they get to their first job site, if it's a maintenance crew or the site they'll be working on for the day, if they're a project crew, they would immediately have a 15-minute crew huddle. And in that crew huddle, we're just talking about the goal for the day, what work areas we're going to focus on, what properties we've got on the agenda for the day. And we're talking labor hours, so that everybody's clear on how many hours we have for each task or property that we're going to visit. And then what we're trying to do is just make sure we have the right labor, material, equipment, subcontractors are there that are needed or will be there that are needed. And then any information gaps. And what we're doing there is we're just really planning the day with intention. And then throughout the day, I always recommend after morning break, lunch, afternoon break, and at the end of the day, just a quick stand up around your trailer or your truck. Review the same things: labor, material, equipment, subs. Now, this sounds like a lot of meetings, but really what it is planning. And what we're doing is we're planning our resources in real time. At the same time, we're also training everybody on the crew to think like a field crew leader, in the sense that everybody's thinking about resource allocation and timelines on projects. And I think that level, that spending that amount of time, throughout the day, that if you added it up, that would be about 30 minutes on a 8-hour shift, talking and planning. And I think in the other 7.5 hours, you get almost double the work done when you actually approach the workday that way. So sometimes just slowing down a little bit really speeds everything up, and a lot less gets forgotten. And the 2 steps forward, 1 step back standard that exists in this industry starts to dissipate pretty quickly. And then as far as the leader, maybe that question was more specific to the leader. I think a leader should be spending time almost exclusively meeting with either clients or employees throughout the day. And, they need to schedule in some blocks specific for strategy and thinking and creative time to plan the business. But I think, we should block significant chunks of time out for that. I don't think we need recurring blocks every day for strategy. I think we should create strategy and then deploy strategy. And in order to deploy it, you have to spend time coaching and advising your employees, but also you have to spend time meeting with clients and partners to develop relationships, build trust, evolve the relationships, nurture those relationships. And so I really think that the leaders' calendars should be largely blocked out with recurring blocks for all of the major areas of the business that they're focused on, which is usually sales and marketing, definitely operations, and then a little bit of time for fleet management, a little bit of time for people strategy, definitely lots of hands-on time for coaching and training and building people.
We are going to shift gears slightly here. We have a question from Taylor. So Taylor says, I have a question regarding the percentage of enhancement sales based on recurring contract revenue. Could you provide some insights or guidelines on how to calculate or track this? Additionally, do you know what the industry average is for this percentage? I was thinking 25 to 30% for enhancement sales based on recurring contract revenue, but what percentage should be expected?
Yeah, for a percentage, I think generally like 25% would be a minimum, 50% would be a really strong, healthy target. So yeah, we're trying to get 50% of the base contract in enhancements as a healthy average. I know a lot of companies are trying to actually match revenue. So, booking the base contracts and then really trying to match that with add-ons and extras. and enhancements. It really does vary based on how much you're packaging into your base contract, though. I really prefer a really low base contract with a lot of itemized billing for fine gardening labor and turf packages, seasonal cleanups, seasonal color, seasonal lighting, holiday decor, all of these add-ons I really like to see as packages that you then sell in addition. But yeah, generally, I think you should be getting somewhere between 50 and 100% of your base contract, depending on, again, just how much of your work is actually included in the package. That really kind of varies that number significantly. But 25%, I would say, would be very low.
Let's move on to a question here from Joe. So it says, Mark, I'm looking at an acquisition. I am a 35 to 40 employee lawn, landscape, and snow company and looking at a similar size company to buy out. Yes, I know I should be part of LeanScaper, which would help guide me through this, but at this time I'm not. Is there any tips or tricks or 1 to 3 things you would suggest I do in order to get through this? Any specific info from the company I need to know to make a good decision? Any specific structure I need in place before I do something like this?
Here's the thing. This is going to sound like I'm plugging my own services, but it is just how I feel. You do need an advisor if you're going to start doing M&A work for the first time. That could be a M&A advisor, which we do offer those services. I do advise on M&A work. Or, you could just work with a lawyer. The big risk in working just with a lawyer, typically they advise on all kinds of M&A transactions and they're not really industry specific. So oftentimes they, almost hurt as much as they help. I think when you have an advisor from within the industry that understands the business, understands the valuations, also is really well connected to the buyers in most markets, I think that affords you a lot different perspective. And typically advisors are charging 3 to 5% of the deal value. And I think usually you save that whether you're a buyer or a seller, because typically what they catch or help prevent is worth far more than 3 to 5% of the deal. So yeah, if you're going to go it alone, you need to look very closely at the growth rate, the retention rate. You need to look really close at the gross profit and obviously net profit. You really do need to really assess how the cash flow trends have been in the business to really understand what it's going to take post-merger to manage. I think what I've seen is a lot of people do these deals and then realize that it brings an enormous cash flow burden. So really understanding cash flow and how to forecast and plan for it. Also, creating a post-merger integration plan is something that I think most people really underestimate. There is an incredible amount of work in bringing two companies into one, and doing that in a tactful way where you're not really hurting everybody's ego in the process. Everybody believes that what they've built is the best. And, whether it's the employees or the owners of the company that you're buying, they tend to have a lot of strong emotional attachment to the systems and processes and the way things are in the business. And when you come in and try to change that, oftentimes you end up losing the very thing that you bought, which is people. And when you invest in a company, you're investing in the people that are there. And the systems, whether flawed or not, are really shored up by those people. And when you post-merger, I feel like a lot of the best people leave very quickly because there isn't a clear post-merger integration plan. And so people don't know what's going to happen. So they move on very quickly. And I think that's actually one of the things you should be spending the most time on when considering an acquisition, is really doing a lot of due diligence on the team that's there and the systems that are there. And if you've not done that before, you might not understand exactly how to or what questions or checklists to use to really deep dive the operation beyond the metrics. The financial analysis is pretty easy. You can have an accountant and a lawyer help out pretty extensively there, because general accounting is accounting, and so analyzing profitability is easy. But looking a little deeper and starting to see trends in efficiency rates and really identifying the opportunities to get organic growth, I think is another key area where a lot of people just really miss the mark. So I think hiring an advisor that understands how to analyze the current state and the future state and really help you see the opportunity and the risk with an acquisition, and then creating a long-term strategy, including cash flow, growth projections, profit projections, a true 3-year rolling forecast of what that business will look like after being merged and integrated into your business, really sets the stage for how much you should be paying for it, because there's all kinds of changes that happen post-merger within your management team, your leadership team, and of course, the finances in the business.
Really valuable insights there. Thank you, Mark. We've got a question here from Scott. Scott says, how much should we budget for a certain amount of growth for advertising? And where do you get your best bang for your buck, in your honest opinion?
Can we just clarify the ideal customer profile that Scott's looking to attract?
Yeah, absolutely. We can come back to you, Scott. If you just want to drop it in the chat there, just let us know what kind of.
While he's coming back, I'll just say this. Generally, if you're in high growth mode, as much as 5% of revenue could be allocated in your overhead budget for growth. Now, 5% is really aggressive. I don't really recommend dipping much below 2% of revenue. I see a lot of companies operating with almost no marketing budget, but then you take a look at their website and it's old and it doesn't look good. And you just cannot get organic traffic with an old website. Your website needs to be rebuilt and redeployed about every 2 years if you really want to be optimizing the performance, because the algorithm's changing constantly. So we have to be constantly investing there. And then if you really start to think about generating quality content to attract employees and attract customers, there's a media plan that needs to be hatched where you're using professional photographer, professional film, and professional editors to develop that copy so that you can optimize the website and the social media platform. So, generally, I wouldn't ever suggest less than 2%, ideally somewhere between 2 and 5%. Did you get an answer on what the target audience was there?
We haven't gotten an answer yet from Scott, but Mark, why don't you go a little further into detail on what an ICP is, and then maybe give an example for like a high-end residential maintenance customer?
Yeah, sure. So generally, before you start spending any money on marketing, what you're always trying to do is target a very specific customer. I think when we just simply, hang our shingle out and say we're landscaping, we cast too wide of a net and we don't always focus on a niche. And, getting a niche customer is important for many operational reasons, but strictly on the marketing side, what we're trying to do is speak specifically to a customer about our specialty or niche that we like to serve. And so I think generally, if we build a website that is really strong with pictures and portfolio, but also written with SEO in mind so that we capture more organic attention just purely through search engine optimization, it becomes much easier when we write really strong advertising copy that's really focused on that one ideal customer profile, because the more we're talking about that customer and the value proposition that would resonate with them, the more likely our SEO is also speaking to them. And so what we're always trying to do is get as much of the right wording on that website as possible, but we're also trying to attract those people. And so our paid media on both Meta, which will be Google and Instagram, and Google, is going to be very targeted at that ideal customer profile and their lookalike interests and hobbies. And so it becomes easier for us to attract, let's say, a luxury homeowner if we start to think about where they are located, what their average household income is, what their hobbies and interests would be when listed on Facebook and Instagram, so that what we end up starting to do is really marketing to the type of audience that we're hoping for. And I mean, we can drill right down into postal codes when it comes to luxury real estate, for example. So it's just really important to figure out who you want to work for and exactly what you want to sell them, and then really tune the website and the ad copy and any outbound emails all to that ideal customer profile, and then really engage a professional advertising firm to do the digital ads that really understands the industry and can really speak to that ICP with the way they approach running ads on the big platforms.
Scott did get back and said that his ICP was a residential high-end customer. So that worked out really nicely. We've got another question about marketing here from Tim. Tim says, I have a landscape construction business in Southern Ontario. Business leads are very slow this coming year. This is evident with other related companies. At present, I am using a marketing company that uses Google AdWords. However, leads are slow in coming in, even with a new website. Can you suggest other methods of generating leads and sales?
I think this year, I would say business is going to be a little bit challenging if you're north of the border. I think if you're in the US, things are going to be incredibly good this spring. I think if you're in Canada, you're probably going to notice things are going to be a little shaky. The tariffs are certainly cause for concern for a lot of consumers. So I would suggest that things are probably going to be slow. There's definitely going to be a recession. If I were trying to stimulate business in those scenarios, the best piece of advice I have is sell to people you already know. Waiting for the phone to ring is just not going to work in a down economy. You're going to have to get out there and make it happen, which is making phone calls, doing outbound sales to potential partners, could be home builders, luxury real estate agents, landscape architects, landscape designers, vendors, material suppliers, working with, if you're installing pavers, you may want to become like a Techo Block Pro and get on their lead program. I think also direct mail, and I don't mean door hangers, I mean actually targeted direct mail, choosing the streets that you should be working on, putting really high value brochures, and again, not a 2-page, but like a 6-page brochure that explains explains your value proposition very clearly to your ideal customer profile, and really explain how you do business and what makes you different. And that takes, I think, 6 to 8-page brochure, ideally as much as 10. And that brochure should almost read like your website. It's basically you're recreating your website on a brochure, and you're putting that in the door of the clients you want to work for. And if you want to take that a step further, if you are doing recurring maintenance work and, let's say, design build, actually put together a folder, get a professional folder printed, put the brochure on the left, and then on the right, give them a price with their address, pull up LMN and price the job with their address. And you can just create like a customer from the address. And that way, if they do follow up, you just search the address rather than a customer name. And you actually give them a low base monthly contract price with options. Could be, your turf care package, or your garden bed care package, or spring and fall cleanup, or hourly fine gardening, whatever it happens to be. But I would land as many of those on doorsteps as possible this spring. And try to grow that way. You could build 300 to 500,000 in pipeline easily with one person every week going door to door that way. And if you knock on the doors, you'll get even more business, but at the very least, leave it at the door with in a professional folder, again, with your brochure, and you're going to start to build a lot of pipeline that way. But sometimes you just need to be a lot more aggressive in these markets. Personally, I found my business always grew the most during recessions, believe it or not. I think I was probably more aggressive in my marketing and sales tactics, and it just seemed like it always worked. And again, your partnerships really keep paying in these slower times, and then going back to your existing customers and trying to book meetings to do property walkthroughs, follow-ups, add-on project, phased projects. Just talk to everybody that you've ever done any work with, and usually there's a lot of work sitting right inside that list.
Perfect. We are going to shift gears from marketing to hiring and HR. So we have a couple questions here. The first one is from Andy. It says, I'm looking for a salesperson and have looked at the scorecard. Our marketing at this point is our website. The candidate I am working with has industry experience and ran his own company. I'm hiring a headhunter as well as someone to deal with some of the inbound leads. My question at this point, what should my expectation for a sales volume be based on a late season start, hopefully within a month? He's looking for a base of 75K plus commission.
What was the type of services, did it say?
He doesn't say the type of service.
Sorry, it's really hard for me to answer that just without knowing if it's residential or commercial, and then whether it's install or maintenance. Generally, the sales targets vary a lot based on the type of customer and of course the type of work. So I can give some ranges for each, and that might add more.
He got back to us already. So he said design, build, and maintenance residential.
Residential. Okay. So maintenance in residential, a full-time salesperson just selling maintenance in residential, who ends up kind of selling and doing account management, maintaining the accounts, getting the enhancement revenue, and then also selling the new business. Typically, what I see there is anywhere between 1.5 and 2.5 million, depending on the enhancement volume that they're managing. So one full-time sales rep for up to 2.5 million in revenue. In design build, I think each sales rep should be somewhere between 2 and 5 million if the project sizes are a little bit smaller, like 50 to 100,000. If you're doing a lot of larger projects that are more in, let's say, that 250 range, if you're doing swimming pool backyards, for example, I think it's reasonable to get, beyond 5 million. You could see easily 5 to 7 million. I've seen some really capable design build salespeople even pushing upward of 10 million if they're doing larger projects. Again, if you're selling a $500 to $1 million backyard, you don't need many of them to hit that number. So it really depends on the project size. That really dictates a lot. But I always try to like to think about just meeting volume. And if you think about it, if you're doing a lot of small ticket sales, there's a lot more meetings per sale, which bogs the salesperson down. So when I give those ranges, just always keep in mind that if the average sale is smaller, then the budget or target is going to be significantly smaller.
We've got a question here from Robert. So Robert says, what's the best way to handle a crew leader that consistently punches into the wrong job in the crew app? Like same street, but wrong job, and does not finish all of the tasks before moving on to another job. As an example, we had mulch prep and install job, and the crew skipped it because they thought it would be better to use a bark bower, but we did not figure that into the estimate due to the cost of rental and customer budget.
Okay, so the simple answer is this is exactly why standard operating procedures are needed. So you create a standard operating procedure for using the LMN Crew app, which includes fully utilizing the app the way it is intended to be used. So that would be when you arrive, you clock in to the task that you're doing, and before leaving, you complete all of the tasks that are scheduled and assigned, and you update all of those tasks, and then you clock out. And so if you've created that standard operating procedure and you've trained everybody to it and everybody's agreed that they're clear and capable of doing the work, and they're not doing the work, then you've got a few options. You can retrain with a verbal warning and say, listen, I really need you to rethink the standard operating procedure and confirm that you understand it because you're not following it. And so if they are willing to do that and they proceed and the work is not happening as planned again, then I would probably move on to a corrective action, whether that's, generally a written warning or a corrective action notice. If it continues, I think it's obvious that this person is not going to adapt to the company systems and processes. If you haven't already tried to explain the why behind these systems, then maybe try refocusing there. But if you've already explained very clearly the why, and you've done the training and you've got an SOP and they're just ignoring the SOP after a few attempts, I would make the hard decision and let them go. And I'd be very clear with everybody else in the company why. And I think this only has to happen a few times in your company before it stops happening. And if even if it is a valuable person in terms of like their skills and knowledge, we're really not going to be able to leverage all of that properly if they're not willing to use the systems that we've created to track billing and payroll. And I think it's really important to pull people back to billing and just say, like, we can't possibly make a profit and continue to pay wages and increase wages to everybody here if you won't follow our systems. And this is really, holding us back from reaching our full potential as a team. And if you're not willing to do your part, then you can't be on the team. And I think it's really important to always pull back the SOPs and the delivery of the why to the fact that you as the owner or leader are here to do what's right for everybody on the team. And if one person won't follow along with the standard operating procedures and the strategy that you've created to make it all happen, then you can't keep them on the team.
Really good advice, Mark. We've got one more HR question for you here. It's from an anonymous attendee. It says, as a solo founder building a company, how can I clearly establish and maintain the boundaries between employer and employee from the start? I want to ensure that expectations are well defined and respected. Additionally, how can I make sure I'm hiring the right person and setting them up for success from the beginning?
Those are really, really good questions. So the fact that you're asking them is a great start. I will say this, it is very hard when you're younger or when you're new in business to create that distinction because, the reality is you're starting out, and yes, you might be the leader, but those first few hires are very much almost like partners in the sense that they can see that there's not a lot of systems and procedures and whatnot in the business yet. And so oftentimes they are maybe developing a different type of relationship where things can be a little bit less rational and maybe a little bit more emotionally driven. And that's only natural with a startup because there's not a lot of framework there yet. So I think my advice is try to keep it as professional as possible, but also allow there to be a really strong bond. And I think that's super healthy. I'm a big believer in an integrated life, and I don't need to be anybody's boss or control anybody, but I do need to make sure that they understand our why and our mission and vision and what we stand for and our core values. And they need to understand that we're we're in business to make money to support ourselves and our families. And when I make decisions to drive revenue and profit, I'm making that on behalf of everybody. And if I don't make those decisions, then we're not going to be around in business for much longer. And so I think just really towing the line and making sure that despite the fact that the business is smaller, that you lead with mission, vision, and core values. You share the targets as clearly as possible, and then you bring your conversations rationally back to the targets that you have in front of you. And when you see behavior that's not really supporting the targets, just explain what you need them to do differently and why, and kind of keep it professional and rational. And I think you'll be fine. It's just, in most cases, it's just a lack of strategy that actually blurs that line between professionalism and, friendship. And I think it is really important to be friends with everybody in your organization, whether you own the company or work with them. We spend 30 to 40% of our lives working to support our families. And we're doing that with other people that we should be able to love and connect with at work, professionally, to support each other so that we can create more prosperity mutually for our own missions and, serve our customers better. So I think it's all in the way you deliver mission, vision, strategy, and core values, and then really stay on target with living and behaving in accordance with that. Because you lead each day really by doing in a smaller business, and when you're doing the right thing and asking people to do the right thing, I think you end up finding each other's strengths and weaknesses and playing to them over time, which I think the more friendly you are, the easier that is to happen.
It's very clear that it is spring right now based on the questions that are coming in, definitely focused on marketing and hiring. We've got another question here for you from Mohammed. He says, when hiring first operation manager to help me scale my business from 1.5 million to 3 million, what main roles do I delegate to him, and what main focus should I be focusing on to move the needle? We do design, build, commercial maintenance, 60% landscaping, 40% maintenance.
Generally, an ops manager in a commercial install and maintenance business is typically going to be highly focused on material management and crew management, as they would in just about any segment. But in residential, I find ops managers end up having to do a little bit more customer service work, just because homeowners require a little more high touch. But in the commercial side, I think, staying ahead of material requirements, really staying ahead of schedule, any special equipment needs, really focused on the crew schedule, hyper focused on the timelines needed on all of the different projects. Generally, lots of coordination of equipment at your size. The ops manager is generally the fleet manager as well. So managing the fleet maintenance, the fleet repairs, the fleet allocations to the crews, again, combined with material scheduling and people scheduling, you're going to be pretty busy there. Ideally, if you're selling still, which usually at your size, you're the prime salesperson, really creating a strong handoff process from you or whoever is selling to the ops manager so that they can be really proactive about crew schedule, material schedule, equipment schedule. Coordinating any subcontractors that might be needed is often another major area of focus for that ops manager. Yeah, those would be the prime areas. Within people, obviously, the ops manager is usually heavily involved in training and health and safety regulation and compliance. And then within fleet, they're usually also very involved in training and compliance as well. So lots of tasks for an ops manager at that size. It's a difficult job because they're kind of bridging many future managers, but it can also be very rewarding and fulfilling, I think, for the right type of person as well. It's a hard position to find. It's much easier, I think, to almost grow that person from within at that size. It's hard to be able to attract a really strong ops manager from a larger company just because they're usually being paid six figures. And oftentimes at that 1.5, you're not quite ready to pay that top dollar yet. So it might make sense to bring somebody up from within that has a more of an administrative strength over, maybe field trade strength.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. We've got another one here, shifting gears completely. As we head into busy spring season, what are the top priorities landscaping companies should focus on right now to ensure a strong start and set the tone for a successful year? With so much continuous improvement and so many things to look ahead with the business, we want to make sure we're focusing on the right things that matter the most and not get distracted by the smaller, less impactful initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, the top things that I always try to tell people, just getting, the crew onboarded properly and really focused on the actual metrics. And so take the extra time to train the team on how to use the technology that you're going to use to track time on jobs. I think that's really important. If you're using the LMN Crew app, make sure that every crew member understands how to clock themselves in and out, what work areas they're working on, and how to update any tasks that need to be completed or added for recurring maintenance accounts, for example. So definitely really making sure that the team understands the technology you're using. That's a strong start. An onboarding workflow for everybody. What are you actually going to be doing over the next 30, 60, 90 days for training? This is a big one that I think the major cause of the turnover rates that we see in the industry. We see a huge increase in turnover rates in the first 30, 60, 90 days of employment. And I think when we see a lot of people leaving the company that fast, 50 to 70% of the employees turn over in the first year, and most of those turn over in the first 90 days. I think what we can safely say is without a proper onboarding training over the first 30, 60, 90, employees get overwhelmed or they get put off of the company. Now, when you've got a training program like Greenius or an on-the-job program or a combination of the two, when they start getting training on day one and they're continuously being trained over the first 90 days, they start to see the light. They feel as though they can figure this out. And I think they feel like they've joined a professional company. And so I really strongly urge people to create a 90-day onboarding plan. It's very easy to do in Greenius with the new learning pathways. I'd start there as far as training because it's an easy thing to deploy. You can give people a password and they start training on their own. And this isn't something that slows you down right now in your peak season. There's enough course material there to really deploy onboarding. So that for employee prep, that's where I'd start. For project planning, I think really making sure that you've got a really strong morning rollout is a good preseason area of focus. Making sure that the crews can come in and leave the yard within 15 minutes with the project plans, with their routes, with their material, with the right people, with their gas cans and their equipment. I think just having a really solid morning rollout and a good equipment setup with your trucks and trailers is a great area to focus on coming into the season. And then, last but really certainly not least, really spending time with your customers, getting out on the properties, doing spring health checks, whether it's going back to projects that you completed last year for a 1-year warranty checkup or meeting with your recurring maintenance customers. I think there's just so much add-on revenue that's really high margin, really low touch, really fast close. I think just getting out there and spending time with your customers early in the year is really important as well. So those would be my first few that come to mind.
That's really great. And I did just drop a note in the chat for our accelerator members that we will be focusing on kind of the three main things you should be looking at for spring during our monthly webinar, which is next Monday. So more information to come for our accelerator members. We're excited to dive into that in a 3-hour session with Mark.
Yeah,
So
we're going to cover those three systems in depth. So we're going to value stream map three key preseason systems that set you up for the most efficient work year yet. So we're pretty excited about that 3-hour session. I think it'll be pretty impactful, and you'll have some really good actionable takeaways to go to work with right away.
right. All right, we are at time. Thank you so much to everybody for your questions. If we weren't able to get to your question today, we will be dropping them in the community along with some responses this week. So thank you so much for the participation. Mark, anything that you'd like to add before we let everybody go?
No, that's great. I appreciate everybody joining, and good luck out there. Spring is here for sure. It seems like everybody's hard at it. All the best this week, and looking forward to our big session next week if you're in that accelerator program.
All right, thank you everyone. Take care.